Showers in the south ease away. Thursday brings some outbreaks of rain into the northwest, whilst Friday sees further showers for many, but not quite as lively.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the day's big issue and we look at them in depth. Nothing is off the table, and I'm not going to cancel anybody for saying what's on their mind. Keeping me company today is journalist and political commentator Patrick O'Flynn, and here's what we've got coming up on the show. New figures on jobs and wages have been released. Inflation has driven the fastest fall in real pay on record. Job vacancies are also in decline, but it's not all bad news. I'll have the detail. Plus, the Royal Navy is to end its role in charge of tackling channel migrants. What will that mean when crossings this year have doubled to over 20,000? And Brits are being warned that the UK is to be battered by thunderstorms and flash flooding, and it could lead to power cuts and transport chaos. That's what we're going to be discussing for the next hour. What do you want to talk about? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. First, though, it's time for the GB News headlines with the ever-so-hardworking Rosie.
A very good afternoon to you. It is just 1 minute past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now, new figures have shown wages are falling at their fastest rate since records began more than 2 decades ago. The ONS say growth in regular pay, excluding bonuses, was 4.7% between April and June. Now, when we take into account rising prices, the real value of wages fell by 3%. Household budgets are being stretched by increasing prices of food, energy and fuel. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has defended her party's plans to help the economy.
We're still in the leadership contest at the moment. Now, my priority is reducing taxes so people can keep more of their own money, at the same time as making sure we boost energy supply. It's wrong to just keep sticking plasters on this problem. What we actually need to do is make sure we are unleashing more energy, for example, from the North Sea. We're investing in technologies like nuclear, and we're finding more renewable energy as well. We need to solve this problem for the long term.
The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says this is further evidence of the mounting pressure on millions of people.
Look, this is further pressure on so many families, so many working people. And this wage stagnation has been going on for 10 years. So I really understand just how people are struggling. It's one of the reasons that we announced our energy price freeze yesterday, to keep those bills down and to make the choice that the oil and gas companies in the North Sea should pay a windfall tax to help people who are struggling through this winter period. So it's further evidence, I think, of the pressure that so many millions of people are under.
The former Manchester United player Ryan Giggs is currently on trial for allegedly assaulting his girlfriend and her sister. We can find out more. Sophie Reaper is our GB News North West reporter, has been covering the case for us outside Manchester Crown Court this afternoon. Sophie, what's been heard so far in court?
Well, we're into day 7 of the Ryan Giggs trial here in Manchester. And so far this morning, we've heard a written statement from the former Manchester United player that was taken shortly after the alleged incident in 2020. He said that he had never intended to harm either of the Greville sisters, but he did describe himself as emotional, angry and upset on that night. As for the assault on Miss Greville itself, he said that their heads did clash, but he denies it being a deliberate action. In a further statement from Mr Giggs, the court heard that the couple had planned to go to therapy together and that he felt that they both had equal control in the relationship. That's despite one of the charges against him being controlling and coercive behaviour against Miss Greville.
And he denies all charges. Sophie, thank you very much, covering the case for us this week at Manchester Crown Court. A military base in Russian-occupied Crimea has been hit by a series of explosions. Moscow claimed the blasts were caused by sabotage following a series of attacks last week on Russian warplanes along the Crimean coast. Ukraine hasn't publicly admitted to the attack. Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling on world leaders to help force Russian troops to withdraw from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station in southeastern Ukraine. The Conservative leadership candidates have vowed to better scrutinise the Scottish government if they become the next Prime Minister. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will face off in another hustings in Perth this evening. Both have stated their opposition to a referendum on Scottish independence. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has committed to getting Scotland's economy moving. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak wants there to be greater scrutiny of Scottish civil servants in the country and for it to be more accountable, whilst calling for the unions to work together. Well, Conservative MP Andrew Bowie believes Rishi Sunak is the ideal candidate for Scotland to remain in the UK.
And it's my view that Rishi Sunak is best placed to ensure Scotland's place at the heart of our United Kingdom for years to come. That's why I'm backing him. We need to ensure that the UK government is as representative and as, stands up for Scottish people as it does for people across the rest of the United Kingdom. That's one way that we're going to ensure Scotland remains at the heart of the UK. But the other is by taking the SNP on at the ballot box and beating them.
The body of a teenage girl's been found after she got into difficulty in water on Monday near Manchester. Police say they're confident her death isn't suspicious. A yellow thunderstorm warning is in place for most of the UK. The alert will stay there for southern England until tomorrow. The forecast rain isn't enough to remedy weeks of dry weather. A drought's been declared in Yorkshire today. That region now joins 8 areas of England which were moved into drought status last week. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's head back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
So, new job stats are out today, and while the government could brag about lower unemployment and pretend the nation's economy is in great shape, a scratch below the surface shows a rather different and far bleaker story. Wages have, on the whole, gone up, yes, but nowhere near enough as much as inflation, meaning real wage value is at its lowest point in 2 decades. And it turns out a load of people have just exited the labour market, packing up during the pandemic, never to return, with yawning gaps the world over in a range of critical sectors. Meanwhile, those at the top are pocketing a huge amount more than their employees, far more so than the last time our economy hit similar skids in the 1970s. Chief execs in the UK get an average 759% more than their employees, making the wage gap here one of the biggest of all major economies. In fact, 90% of chief execs pocket 165 times more than the average nurse, 140 times more than teachers, and 132 times more than a copper. Now, I haven't gone all socialist on you, but don't you think something is desperately wrong when some are setting up multi-million-pound trust funds when others can't even feed their kids? Especially when those people are public service execs, paid for by us. Well, let's first discuss these figures with Professor Len Shackleton, who's an editorial and research fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Great to have you on, Len. I mean, overall, looking at the broad scheme of things, are these figures a dreadful story, an average performance, or actually is there a little bit of hope involved?
Yeah, it is a mixture, Alex. It's half full, glass half empty kind of story. I mean, the big plus is that we are still, we still have a very high level of employment, low level of unemployment. Redundancies are very low. People are keeping jobs. The problem is, of course, that the jobs are not bringing in as much money as people would like to have, and that is a serious issue.
And what about all of the gaps in the labour market? We've become quite used to backlog Britain right now, the fact that we don't have people in the sort of jobs like baggage handling at airports or picking fruits on farms. I mean, what's the picture there?
Yeah, the labour market is working to some extent, because in areas where labour is short, we are seeing increases in pay than the average. Whether this process is moving quite fast enough, of course, is a different matter. COVID and also, of course, the massive rise in energy prices is major changes in the pattern of demand in Britain, and it will take a certain amount of time to adjust to it. I remain kind of broadly positive about it. I'd be a lot more worried if unemployment was rising sharply. You emphasised earlier on that real pay has not been rising, but then this is a statistical artifact. It's a median figure. Most people achieve higher pay by advancing in their careers, by moving jobs. That's the most common way in which pay increases, of course, by promotion, by adding to their human capital, by taking extra qualifications and so forth. So one mustn't be too gloomy about this, I think. The labour market is shifting all the time. People come in at low levels and are not paid very much. People exit at the top end. There've been a lot of shifts in where the median lies. So I think you ought to look very carefully at these figures and making generalisations about them.
Len, thank you so much for coming on. We had a few problems with your audio there, as one often does. Probably the thunderstorms, let's blame that. But really great to hear your expert opinion. That is Dr. Len Shackleton from the IEA. Well, now we know that there are an estimated 400,000 job vacancies in the hospitality sector. Well, it's a possible sign that the UK economy is bouncing back. Is that really the case? Let's speak to Michael Kill from the Nighttime Industries Association. Michael, great to have you on. First of all, let's start with the number of job vacancies. Is that something that you have seen in your industry, and what is that reflecting, do you think?
Well, without a doubt, we're still struggling with staffing. In particular, we have a real issue with the sort of skilled workers, mid to senior skilled workers, which are very, very difficult to get hold of at the moment. As you've heard, for chefs and particularly things like security has been very, very difficult, and there have been a massive shortcoming. Hence the reason why things like rates of pay and environments and benefits, etc., have had to be looked at across the hospitality sector as a whole. And we are working very hard as a trade association across many of our members to ensure that there is many opportunities out there for people, but we are still struggling, and there are still businesses that are unable to trade to their full hours, their full capacity, because of staff shortages at the moment.
Well, on some level, is this not a fairly decent sign for the industry? Because surely in a cost of living crisis, one of the first things to suffer is hospitality. People think, I don't have enough money in my back pocket to go out this weekend.
Well, you've got to consider all the elements here. One, you've got to understand that we're just starting to move into those areas. There are still people that have money to spend. There are less businesses out there because we know the pandemic has lost many, many businesses across the 3 years. But we're moving into an area where businesses are being challenged by cost inflation. We're seeing things like a 300% increase in energy costs. We're seeing a 100% increase in business interruption insurance. Supply chain have had to lift their costs. And also we're seeing the increases in things like NI for staffing, and also product costs increasing. And it's a perfect storm, realistically, because there's no headroom to pass those costs on to the consumer because they've got less disposable income. So we're almost in a catch-22 where we're seeing all of the supply and costs related to operation increasing without the ability to increase the product cost at the other end in terms of the consumer, because one, they will not come out, or the frequency of visits will slow, or dwell times within these businesses will slow, and ultimately they'll affect long-term business positions. So we're in a hugely challenging place at the moment, and the only thing that we can conceive in terms of support has got to come from government, and it's got to be about driving down inflation. But at the moment we're in stasis because of old administration not wanting to make a decision to move forward and new administration not quite in place yet.
Yeah, I know. It's a really horrible period of limbo for a lot of businesses while we wait for that change at the top. Michael, it's really great having you on again, and I'm sure we'll be talking again in the near future because your industry, hospitality industry, always a very good litmus for the state of the country's economy. Michael Kill, CEO of Nighttime Industries Association. Well, joining us for this hour is Patrick O'Flynn, journalist and Social Democratic Party politician who served as a member of the European Parliament. And we're also joined by Luke Murfitt, who's the CEO at Integrity Cleaning, based in the Southwest. Luke, I'm going to come to you first. I mean, we're hearing about the amount of job vacancies out there, about the squeeze on people's wages. What are things looking like in your company?
OK, well, Integrity Cleaning, we're the southeast, just to put that down. And we work primarily in the construction industry, helping businesses, helping developers in construction, large-scale projects. We're obviously, it's growing, and we're facing obviously more growth. So there's actually more job opportunities. We have had to increase the wages to enable the cost of living for workers, for cleaners. So what we're finding is actually the opportunities are out there. But I mean, the way that we run, I run my company, Integrity Cleaning, is threefold, which is basically efficiency, fairness and respect. Now, the fairness also means fair wages. We certainly don't aim for the lowest. By far, we actually put it up about 50%. As a result of that, we actually get much better productivity, efficiency, and obviously get more respect, and we end up with large projects. So I think actually it's down to a lot of business owners to also look at the efficiency. Let's not just see it as a crisis, let's see it as an opportunity and things to overcome.
In terms of the sort of work that workers that you employ, have you had any difficulty filling your vacancies? Has there been a sort of flood of workers since the pandemic, since Brexit, for example?
Perhaps the companies which don't look after the staff and workers before. We haven't ourselves. Maybe sometimes in the holiday season, there's obviously a lot of people from Lithuania and sort of Poland and things. They like to go back in the summer, and so we have to find sort of ways of dealing with projects then. But large-scale construction projects, not so much. But we have had to obviously reflect and show, as we always have done, 40-50% increase in pay is what we sort of pay above the average wage that a cleaner would get. But we get more than that in return.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in you talking about the fact you've been able to put up wages, which is, really worthy. And I'm sure, a lot of people out there would hope that other businesses follow suit. But how have you been able to afford doing that? Because there might be people watching this who run small businesses thinking, I'd love to be able to pay my workers more, but I just can't find that extra money.
Well, when I started my company 4 years ago, I didn't look to see what was the lowest I could get away with. I looked to see what was the maximum I could get away with, the maximum I could pay to workers. We've helped mothers back to work. Last month, we helped a 200th mother back into work and 37 fathers. And this changes lives and it changes, respect. When you pay people better, it means they don't have to have 3 jobs. It means they're not worn out. It means they have better families, better lifestyles, and they can come back fresh working Monday, and they always give me 110%.
Luke, it's been fascinating having you on the programme. Thanks so much for coming down and telling us all about your particular business. Patrick, I mean, listening to Luke there, if all businesses were like that, wouldn't the world be a better place?
Well, it certainly would, and part of it depends on finding a niche in a profitable sector and selling goods and services to, perhaps other companies, larger companies, who can afford to pay above the kind of bottom of the market wages. And, and that's the economy doing what it should do, allocating resources to more profitable, higher added value tasks, and we want to see that. And that's how, in the old days, a capitalist economy grew and everyone got better off. And I actually think the pay today, the 4.75% pay rises, if inflation was in its normal range, about 2%, then that would roughly be what Boris told us he was aiming to achieve, to make work pay a bit, not to push the button marked immigration, to move away from that kind of rock bottom, cheap labour method of running the economy and go for productivity increases. The abnormal thing is the 10% inflation, and if those wages increases had been much higher, you would now have the Bank of England governor Andrew Bailey moaning on about the creation of a wage price spiral. Now, I don't think you've seen that, but it is good to know that wages aren't like dead flat, so they're not wholly keeping up with prices, but they are providing some insulation against the price rises. So economists are never wholly happy, but I do think there's some silver linings in this data today.
Oh, we love a silver lining on this programme. Luke, thank you once again for coming in, and Patrick, thank you for your thoughts. Do you see any silver linings out there? Let us know, would you? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, coming up, you are, of course, with GB News on TV and radio. The Royal Navy is backing out of Channel migrant patrols. It comes as the number of crossings this year has doubled to over 20,000. It's time, though, now for a check on the weather forecast, and it looks like it's going to be a little unsettled.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The heat wave we had at the weekend seems like a distant memory. It's now cloudier, it's feeling cooler, and rain or showers, as well as hit and miss thunderstorms, will continue to affect many places during the rest of the day, but not everywhere. Some places will stay dry. Low pressure towards the south is sending some showers and thunderstorms up from the Channel at the moment, and they'll continue to progress north across England and Wales. And I think it's really across the Midlands, parts of eastern and southern England, as well as Wales, where we'll see the greatest risk of thundery downpours, hail, lightning, and some torrential rain in a short space of time. But they'll be hit and miss. In between, there'll be some brighter interludes, some drier interludes. For northern England, Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland, cloudy with some outbreaks of rain, but mostly this will be light and patchy. It will tend to fade away overnight, with some clear spells coming in for the far north, along with a cool breeze. Elsewhere, across much of central and southwestern England, South Wales as well, heavy rain continues, perhaps some further thunderstorms as well. Another warm night, not quite as oppressively warm as recent nights, 16 Celsius in the south, 9 or 10 for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. And we start the day on Wednesday with rain or showers across parts of the Midlands into southern England. But then by the afternoon, the focus for some really lively and torrential downpours, likely across parts of London, Kent, East Sussex, for example. And here there is the risk of flash flooding. Some serious thunderstorms perhaps for some, but again, they'll be hit and miss. Elsewhere, a quieter day. Plenty of sunshine actually through the day for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and then those cloud breaks drift south. Eventually, the showers in the south ease away. Thursday brings some outbreaks of rain into the northwest, whilst Friday sees further showers for many, but not quite as lively.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Alex Phillips on GB News. The Royal Navy is to end its control of Channel migrant operations early next year, GB News can confirm. The Navy took over command and control functions in April as part of a three-pronged plan to deal with the growing number of small boats crossing the English Channel. The confirmation by the Ministry of Defence comes as the number of people crossing the Channel in small boats reached 20,300 at the weekend, twice the number who crossed into UK waters at this time last year. Well, let's talk now to our home and security editor, Mark White, who can tell us more. Mark, why are the Navy pulling out? I mean, this was supposed to be part of Boris's grand plan to tackle this problem.
Well, the Ministry of Defence have said that this was always their intention to review the command and control function that they've undertaken in the English Channel come the 31st of January next year. But it is, we believe, now the intention of the Ministry of Defence to hand back that command and control function to Border Force. Now, the Prime Minister in April at Lydd Airport in Kent announced what was a three-pronged plan to try to get to grips with the small boats crisis. And now all three of those elements are either halted or they're coming to an end. The command and control function, as I say, will come to an end at the beginning of next year. The other plan to send thousands of asylum seekers down to Rwanda for processing has been held back by a number of legal challenges in the court, and that's going nowhere fast. And then the third prong of this plan, the proposal to house at least 1,200 asylum seekers in a disused RAF base in the village of Linton-on-Ouse in Yorkshire, which would be the model, the blueprint for similar larger scale accommodation centres. Well, that has now been abandoned because of widespread public outrage in that particular area. So this plan, or the plans and proposals to try to get to grips with the small boats crisis appears at the moment to be somewhat in disarray as more asylum seekers continue to come across the English Channel every single day. You said in your introduction there, 20,300. Well, more came across yesterday. The weather, it's a bit hit or miss this week, but we are expecting in the days ahead more boats, small boats, to leave those shores in northwest France to try to get to UK waters.
Mark, thank you ever so much for the update. You're very good at this, Mark. You always know exactly what's going on and who's crossing that channel. Well, joining for this hour is Patrick O'Flynn, journalist and Social Democratic Party politician who served as a member of the European Parliament. Patrick, I mean, when it comes to the government's policy on this, it was like, yeah, let's get the Navy in the Channel. That'll sort it out. Done. Then it was, oh, let's send them to Rwanda. That'll sort them out. Done. I mean, none of it's working. What on earth? Where do they go now?
No, I mean, they've been found out terribly badly. Personally, I think this policy area, the failure in it, was a crucial factor in Boris Johnson running out of road, because in the early days of, Partygate or Downing Street furnishings or whatever, there was still a substantial constituency of opinion in the country who thought, Boris, he's our guy, he's going to sort out our issues, whether it be Brexit or whether it be immigration control, and they were willing to protect him. But I think they became more and more disillusioned, and in the end there was no core to protect Boris Johnson anymore. And I think Liz Truss, who, I'm firmly predicting will be Prime Minister in early September, she's billed herself as someone who's a doer, who makes things happen, who gets things done. Now, that's an interesting, like, Ron Seal style, whatever it says on the tin, sort of billing and branding for a politician. But if she doesn't grasp this issue within a very few months, then that brand is going to fall apart as well. So I think it was always a stunt, the Royal Navy coming in. It just sounded exciting. In the end, they just seem to have arranged a more efficient water taxi service back to Dover. You could argue that's actually incentivised more crossings. The French have proved unwilling to take back mid-channel migrants. All the money we pay them, that hasn't worked. Rwanda, as you say, shelved. The fundamental thing they need to do is get us out of the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights and implement a no one who arrives illegally stays regime.
I was about to ask you what the solution is when the French refuse to cooperate with us, but there you go, quite neatly. I think there you have it. Send them back by hook or crook. Patrick, thanks. I want to know your views. Did you think the Rwanda plan was going to work? Regular viewers of this show will know that I was extremely sceptical, and I remain so. So I want to hear your thoughts on this. gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at gbnews. What is it the government has to do to really get on top of this problem? 20,300 people have arrived so far across the channel this year alone, twice the number this time last year. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Coming up, thunderstorms and flash flooding are expected to hit the UK. Brits are being warned it could lead to power cuts and transport chaos. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines with Rosie.
It is 2:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. New figures show wages are falling at their fastest rate since records began more than 2 decades ago. The ONS say growth in regular pay, excluding bonuses, was 4.7% between April and June. When we take into account rising prices, though, the real value of wages fell by 3%. Household budgets are being stretched by the increasing prices of food, energy and fuel. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has defended her party's plans to help the economy.
We're still in the leadership contest at the moment. Now, my priority is reducing taxes so people can keep more of their own money, at the same time as making sure we boost energy supply. It's wrong to just keep sticking plasters on this problem. What we actually need to do is make sure we are unleashing more energy, for example, from the North Sea. We're investing in technologies like nuclear, and we're finding more renewable energy as well. We need to solve this problem for the long term.
A military base in Russian-occupied Crimea has been hit by a series of explosions. Moscow claimed the blasts were caused by sabotage following a series of attacks last week on Russian warplanes along the Crimean coast. Ukraine hasn't publicly admitted to the attack. In the UK, a man is in a serious condition in hospital and 2 other people are injured after a shooting last night in northwest London. Armed police were called to a residential street in Brent just after 7 p.m. yesterday. All 3 men were shot but are stable today. The Metropolitan Police say the suspects fled the scene before officers arrived. The UK can expect days of thunder as heavy rain and flooding are set to continue. A yellow thunderstorm warning is in place for most of England and Wales. Flash flooding affected a number of areas in Scotland overnight. The alert will stay in place for southern England until Wednesday. Earlier, a teenage girl was found after she got into difficulty in water on Monday near Manchester. Police say they're confident her death isn't suspicious. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, while the country staggers along with an economy like a heavy drink at 11 in the morning, the two hopefuls promising to sort it all out have gone to Scotland, where they are trying to appeal to the handful of Tory members north of Hadrian's Wall to back their bids to become Prime Minister. And in order to woo the McParty faithful, they're both promising to bring Scotland closer to Westminster and give members in Holyrood greater freedom to make barbed comments while the SNP are leading the Assembly. But will it be enough to hold the union together? Well, our Scotland reporter Davy Donaldson has been in Stirling to find out how voters are feeling there about the Tory leadership contest. Davy, what sort of things have you been hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I was in Glasgow earlier on today. The mood there was one of very much of indifference. I don't think people really interested in the slightest that Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak are coming in Scotland. They're going to be here for the hustings in Perthshire tonight. I think a lot of people they just didn't really care, and I think partly that is because neither of them supporting an Indie Ref 2 in a country which is obviously has an SNP government, so that's one of the major reasons. One of the other reasons, of course, as well as Rishi Sunak coming out and says he wants to actually control things centrally in terms of things like education, which obviously was devolved to the Scottish Government previously. So again, I'm sure that won't be very, very popular. And the other one, when he says, you know, he's got to get people that come in front of him to try and justify their position, really, which is, you know, the Chief Civil Servant of Scotland every year to come past and actually give him an update on what's happening is a little bit far-reaching as well. And I'm sure, again, a lot of people won't be happy with that. Of course, there will be supporters of the Conservative Party in Scotland. Earlier, I spoke to some people in Stirling to get their views on this trip to Scotland by Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss both in Scotland today. What do you make of that? And do you think it'll make any difference?
I don't think it'll make a blind bit of difference at all. I think they should get on and decide who's going to run the Conservative Party and who's going to lead the country and stop wasting time.
I mean, Liz Truss has come out and said that Nicola Sturgeon is an attention seeker. Is that something you think she is, or?
Absolutely. She needs to shut up and get on with her job and stop pushing for unwanted referendums.
Might tighten the case for independence. It might make people a bit keener to be independent once they hear what they really think when they're talking to their own.
Well, there we go. Certainly the views of some people across Scotland. Mixed a little bit there, but I think we'll see later on tonight exactly what comes out of the hustings. I think that's really the key thing here. But, of course, we've already heard from Rishi Sunak, we've already heard from Liz Truss, and a lot of people in Scotland have great reservations about, are they going to be any better than Boris Johnson? I mean, Boris Johnson, complete disaster every time he turned up to Scotland. Obviously got a very, very poor response, and given his, obviously his actions at Partygate, that's certainly a lot of people in Scotland very, very unhappy about that. So that he didn't go sooner and ended up going later. So yeah, I mean, I think we're waiting to see what's going to be happening tonight with the hustings. However, I think, I say, most people already made up their minds, and to be honest, I don't think a lot of people really that bothered which Conservative leader gets the leadership of the party, as they feel it's a party that doesn't serve this country.
David Donaldson, nay nonsense as always, just like the good people of Stirling. Thank you so much for going and doing all that hard work for us. Patrick, I mean, it doesn't matter where they are in the country. It seems to be the same old tune being played, isn't it? What are you going to do about the energy crisis, yada, yada. And that man there, who Davey got a Vox farm in Stirling, saying they just need to get on with it now. I mean, I'm beginning to feel like that.
Well, look, they had a process. They have an election. It ends on September the 5th. MPs are on their holidays, Parliament's not sitting. It's not terribly much longer to wait. On the union, I think a lot of unionists will hope to see the new Prime Minister speak with a bit more confidence about the United Kingdom. The problem in Scotland was the SNP outsmarted the Labour Party. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown delivered this devolution settlement they thought would kill nationalism. In fact, it's been the perfect incubator for nationalism by sort of safe baby steps. There was a referendum in 2014. It should have settled it for a generation. That to me, means 25 years. So it'll come back hopefully in the late 2030s, and we'll see what the Scots think then. But it feels like Scots feel more and more Scottish and less British over the long haul. And that's a strategic gain for the SNP.
Patrick, thank you. Well, joining me now is Brian Monteith, who's a former Conservative Party member of the Scottish Parliament and columnist at The Scotsman. Who better to talk to? Brian, my old boss, Mr Whippy, as we called him when he was the whip for the Brexit Party in the European Parliament. A lot of people saying that some of the noises being made by Truss and Sunak, and similar noises they are too indeed, amounts to some form of devolution. Do you agree with that? And do you think there's an appetite for that north of Hadrian's Wall?
I think politicians from Westminster always tread a very fine line between trying to assert to the rest of the UK that they have matters in hand, that they are listening, they are acting, they are giving some leeway to obviously recognise the position of devolved parliaments and assemblies. But at the same time, they cannot press too hard, because that actually might work against the interests they're defending. For instance, if Sunak is really saying, I'm going to insist on certain things in education, then in fact that will actually annoy even Conservatives, because the history of the United Kingdom is that Scottish education has always been run from Scotland. Just as the Church of Scotland has been run from Scotland, such as Scottish law has been run from Scotland. So, there is a balance that has to be found. And I would actually suggest that both Sunak and Truss are very careful they don't push too hard in the wrong areas. There are aspects that do need to be looked at and do need to be challenged, but simply saying they'll intervene on health or education would be a grave error.
What is the condition of the Conservative Party in Scotland at the moment? You were once a member up there. I mean, is it in good shape, or has it been suffering?
Well, I think it's a party that has no self-confidence. I don't speak so much for the members as the politicians. The politicians have a habit of being against the leadership of the Conservative Party at Westminster, the party nationally, and they seem to have an approach where they feel it gives them street cred to criticise the leadership, to be against Boris in particular. Anyone but Boris, they were saying during the previous leadership election. And now they are caught because they know that they can't be cheerleading one so much and not the other. So the party is rather divided. It doesn't really know what to do, when in fact the obvious thing to do is to focus their attention on attacking Nicola Sturgeon and her party. And there are many critics of the Conservative Party within their own ranks who feel that they don't do enough of that because they spend so much time attacking the UK government.
I mean, Liz Truss has made a few barbed comments about Nicola Sturgeon, calling her an attention seeker, for example. I mean, is that, even though you say, yeah, they should be attacking what Nicola Sturgeon perhaps represents politically, is that going to go down well in Scotland? Is that the sort of statesman-like prime ministerial language that would actually work?
Well, I think it was interesting to see your Vox Pop just before I came on, where one of the members of the public said, of course she's an attention seeker. The reason it hit home and caused such controversy was because, of course, it was on the money. There's absolutely no doubt that Nicola Sturgeon is an attention seeker. She calls herself the selfie queen. At COP26, she would not miss an opportunity to traipse around trying to find people of no consequence even, just to have selfies taken. But the point of her attention seeking is twofold. It is one, to take the interest away from her poor record, so that is not covered, and also to focus her attention and stomping up and down, demanding a new referendum. So I think Liz Truss was quite right to say, I'll ignore the attention seeking about trying to have a referendum. But I don't think she was actually saying, I won't pay attention to the First Minister's office or to the Scottish Parliament. And I think she was drawing an important comparison as to how government should be done.
Always great catching up with you, Brian. Lovely to have you on the show. That's Brian Monteith, who was a Scottish MSP for the Conservative Party, then formerly Brexit Party MEP, and now columnist at The Scotsman. Now, after days of extreme heat, meteorologists are now warning people across England to expect thunderstorms and heavy rain over the next few days. The Met Office has issued amber warnings for Cornwall, Devon and Somerset, with the likely chance of homes and businesses flooding, power cuts and a possibility of transport chaos. Meanwhile, yellow warnings are in place for most of the UK today and will stay in place for southern parts of the UK tomorrow. But will this help the drought situation that we're currently in? Who better to talk to than Aidan McGivern, who's a meteorologist and weather presenter at the Met Office and, of course, a familiar face on GB News. Aidan, great to have you. You know, people are sort of saying, well, why the hosepipe ban if the heavens are opening? I mean, it's not really that simple, is it?
No, just to put it into context, some parts of the UK, particularly towards the southeast, have a rainfall deficit so far this year of about 180 millimetres. And the showers this week, in some of the showers, we'll see 50 millimetres in an hour or two. But what you don't want is to make up that rainfall deficit in just a few hours. That would cause flash flooding. Just 50 millimetres in an hour or two would cause flash flooding. And the rainfall deficit that we're seeing is 150 to 200 millimetres. And so even if that was spread out over a week, then that would still cause flooding issues. Because, of course, it's compounded by the fact that the recent heat wave and the very dry weather has baked the top layer of soil so dry that it's really quite solid, and so rain that falls onto that, particularly if it's heavy rain, can run straight off and lead to a flooding risk. Although it sounds bizarre that you could have a risk of flooding when the ground is so dry, that's what happens. The rain runs straight off the dry ground.
And where is this current weather front coming from? Are we sort of drawing it in across the continent where that heat came from? Is it coming from a different direction? And how long do you think it's going to be sticking around for?
Well, what we saw during last week is high pressure centred over the UK, and high pressure acts like a lid on the atmosphere, so the air is descending and it's trapping the heat in the lowest layers, and each day with the sunshine, temperatures rose a little and they peaked on Saturday. Now that heat was trapped, but what we've seen over the last couple of days is a low pressure system from the Atlantic replace that high, and with low pressure the air rises. That heat suddenly starts rising in the atmosphere, condenses and turns into thunderstorms, just like as if you would take a lid off a boiling pan of water. Suddenly it starts bubbling up furiously.
And do you think that we're in for a few wet weeks, days? Is the sunshine going to come back? Can you get out your meteorological crystal ball and give us a little bit of an insight into the future?
Well, the thunderstorm risk remains tomorrow for the south in particular, whilst it turns drier and brighter. Plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and eventually parts of Wales. That drier weather spreads south during Thursday, and then we're back to more typical weather for the UK. So average temperatures this weekend, still some rain around, but more useful rain than the showers and thunderstorms that we're seeing at the moment. So steady, moderate rain that will come in bands from the west, mostly affecting western areas, not too much for the southeast, although we need it there. And then into next week, there are signals that it will turn drier gradually. And by the bank holiday weekend, there are signals that it will turn warmer again.
Well, that's good news. Something to look forward to once again. Aidan McGivern, fantastic having you on the programme to explain the weather in a load more detail. Patrick, we love talking about the weather, don't we? The Brits,
Certainly
it's our
do.
favourite conversation point. Have you been enjoying the heat wave, or has it all been a bit too clammy?
No, I've really enjoyed the sun in the summer. You know, we're always complaining, aren't we, that it's too sunny, too hot, too dry for too long, and now it's too wet and too rainy. You know, it seems to me that on average we're heading out of the drought and replenishing the groundwater, and everything's going to be okay. And I personally very much look forward to a sunny bank holiday, and that's my birthday weekend.
Oh, is it?
So I'm fingers crossed.
There you go, viewers. Make sure cards are in the post for Patrick. Do you know, it's interesting. I was flying back into the UK on Sunday, and I looked out the window and I thought I was flying into Dubai. The colour of the parched land, like just yellow everywhere, not a single blade of green to be seen.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how quick the grass, which appears to be dead, recovers in the parks, I must say. And I think it might be really quickly.
And if you want a really lovely word, you know that smell of rain when it's been really dry and then it rains and there's that amazing fragrance that fills the air? The word for that is petrichor. There you go. One for your personal dictionaries there. Well, has your area been hit by flooding or bad weather? Email me, let GB News know, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at GB News. And if you've got any really good pictures of lightning, if you're one of those people with one of those jazzy cameras with the long lens who can get those amazing flashes, then send those across too. We all love to see that. Well, of course, we moaned about the heat, and now, of course, we're going to moan about the rain, admit it. You know, my laundry yesterday got thunderplumped, there's another good word for you, hanging out in the garden. Well, let's have a moan about a load of other stuff in the news too. It's time for the Daily Rant. So, an advert for paint is the latest thing to be deemed offensive, with the watchdog getting complaints in droves. So, let's have a gander.
Now baby's coming and they don't know what it is.
Hannah's hoping for a girl, Dave's just hoping that it's his.
And they're happy the spare room's no longer grey. 'Cause there's a baby on the way.
Well, apparently people are annoyed because in the advert it sounds a bit like the woman has deliberately got herself knocked up to nail down her partner, while he apparently worries whether the kid is even his. Now, let's be frank, this is probably the most realistic advert on telly. Rather than the picture-perfect couples with marble kitchen tops, mops that turn dog hair-riddled floors into ice rinks, and T-shirts so white you need retinal repair. And without enraging feminists the world over, who I always champion, it's the oldest trick in the book, isn't it? The amount of times I've had the conspiratorial whisper about deliberately letting an accident happen now that I've got a lovely boyfriend. It's a thing, I'm just being honest with you. Now, what on earth is going on in America? Having raided his Mar-a-Lago home to purportedly seize classified documents Donald whisked out of the White House before leaving, something I think he was allowed to do, it now turns out agents have seized his passports too. It wasn't enough to run a show trial trying to bust Trump's chances of standing in 2024. His opponents are now seemingly using the spectacle of raiding his house. Oh, it won't be long before the BBC's Cliff Richard helicopter starts circling above. Why nick his passports, though? At the same time, in Burma, Aung San Suu Kyi is back under house arrest. America is starting to look like the very countries it has for years chastised while fielding that puppet president who could pass for a fossil. No wonder the West's enemies are making their moves. And carpet makers in the German town of Waldorf must have been busy, as the town cats have been under strict lockdown for 3 months. Deutsche Katzen have been imprisoned to protect 3 pairs of great crested larks in the town from malign moggy murder, which means it must have been a field day for mice. Now, according to Google Maps, it will take the Pied Piper 73 hours to walk all the way to Waldorf from Hamelin. And the latest stateside Brit to come out with some weird multi-fangled hybrid accent is Brooklyn Beckham, following Liam Payne, who seemed to swap his Wolverhampton drawl for Irish American, and Prince Harry, who drifts into Hollywood psychobabble every few minutes. To be fair to the younger Beckham, he has lived most of his life in America. But aren't there just some people who are what I like to call accent hoovers? You know the ones. I remember when my brother was at school, he went on a French exchange for 2 weeks and came back speaking like the kid he'd been living with. Thank the Lord I'm not one of them with my Italian boyfriend. Imagine GB News with a Veronese twang. It's also a thing, isn't it, when people go back to their motherlands and the accents get hammed up and the mannerisms ramp up. I have never seen so many more exaggerated shrugs and that Italian hand thing so much than in, last week when I was with him in his hometown, especially when he was driving. Patrick, are you an accent hoover? Do you ever get that thing when you're sort of hanging around an Australian and you start to intonate at the end of your sentences?
I really don't think I do, but what it puts me in mind of was the England football coach Steve McLaren, who got sacked by England and then took a job in the Netherlands, starting to do television interviews with that peculiar Dutch English, we play well.
I don't know what, he's definitely an accent hoover. I don't know what that was.
That was my attempt to do Dutch English a la Steve McLaren, but I try and speak with the same accent all the time. But I do know quite a lot of people who do, as you say, yes.
Now, let's go on to more serious matters. What on earth is going on in America with Trump and the documents and the passports? I mean, is this just theatre by the Democrats to stymie his chances of becoming the candidate in 24? Is there something more serious afoot?
I don't know, and I also can't predict which way it's going to go. I mean, it might be a spectacular backfire if they are doing a political conspiracy against Trump, because it is a way of firing up his base and allowing him to play the persecuted character. That would seem to, grist to the mill for Donald Trump, who's a great communicator. On the other hand, maybe the FBI will find something. I personally wouldn't put it past Donald Trump not to be behaving brilliantly in every conceivable way. So I'm standing back from this one, and I will not attempt to guess which way it would go, other than to say it makes Donald Trump the predominant Republican again and makes it very hard for any other contender to get any oxygen.
Well, it's one thing to say America supersizes its portions and supersizes its politics as well. Well, loads of you have been emailing about some of the topics we've been talking about today on job vacancies. Brian says a record number of job vacancies, yet we can't get staff. It means we are clearly making it easier for people not to work rather than work. Until we stop handing out money, this will not change. Alex, great name, says lots of taxi drivers have left the trade in the last year or so as they cannot afford the fuel costs because they're not allowed to raise fares in some local authority areas. Bus fuel costs are rising, fares have been put up, trains are not available. The whole thing is chaos. Who will sort this mess out? Neither Tory candidates for Prime Minister is up to the task, I'm afraid. And quickly on illegal immigration, June says, I'd do anything to help genuine refugees, but not these young men in general, leaving families behind to fend for themselves. Thank you so much for sending in your views. That's all I've got time for today. Thank you, of course, also to Patrick O'Flynn, who's been brilliant company for the past hour, as always. Join me again for We Need to Talk About on GB News at the same time, 2 o'clock tomorrow. Coming up next, it's The Briefing with Tom Harwood. But first, it's time for a look at the weather forecast, and we could be in for some interesting weather indeed. See you tomorrow.
Hello, good morning. I'm Ada McGivern from the Met Office. The heat wave we had at the weekend seems like a distant memory. It's now cloudier, it's feeling cooler, And rain or showers, as well as hit and miss thunderstorms, will continue to affect many places during the rest of the day, but not everywhere. Some places will stay dry. Low pressure towards the south is sending some showers and thunderstorms up from the Channel at the moment, and they'll continue to progress north across England and Wales. And I think it's really across the Midlands, parts of eastern and southern England, as well as Wales, where we'll see the greatest risk of thundery downpours, hail, lightning and some torrential rain in a short space of time. But they'll be hit and miss. In between, there'll be some brighter interludes, some drier interludes. For northern England, Scotland,